is that this is information coming from Buddha's own direct experience. In what way? In his own mind. In his own mind. So essentially, actually the word Buddha, Sanskrit, and the Tibetan word for it, Sangye, the kind of the etymology is really tasty. The first syllable, sang, implies the utter eradication from one's own mind of all the neuroses, all the ego, all the fears, all the nonsense, all the depression, anxiety, jealousy, low self-esteem, arrogance, all the unhappy parts of us that we utterly know. As soon as we say those words, everybody recognizes that. So this is the first shocking point. Buddha has found, from his own experience, having done the job himself, that one can get rid of this stuff. It is not at the core of our being. This is almost the fundamental essence of all Buddha's teachings, and therefore all Buddha's practice. That's already shocking. Not to mention the second one, gye, that implies the development to perfection, literally, of all the other stuff in there. Kindness, wisdom, love, compassion, generosity, the stuff that we know is the good stuff. So speaking really simply, that is expressing the essence of all of Buddha's practices, all of Buddha's teachings, all his philosophy, all his psychology, all his metaphysics. Everything leads to the accomplishment in one's own mind of that, the fulfillment of that potential. That's the essence of it. So I mean, the implications of this are kind of insane. But even hearing it simply, it's kind of shocking. Why? Because we take as a given that attachment and fears and arrogance and jealousy, and although we can't stand it all, we just assume and nobody questions. Our models of the mind assume, our science assumes that they are natural. And what we mean by natural is that they're so natural that you'd be unnatural if you didn't have them. So we utterly assume that. I think there's no model of the mind in the Western world, the modern world, that would question that. So in other words, we give equal status to all the neuroses and all the goodness. So of course we hopefully can find some way to live our life where they're fairly balanced and the good is maybe better, more than the bad. Because we can see we see the evidence of the presence of these in people's minds. Look at the evidence of too much psychosis and anger and rage and jealousy and depression. It's nightmarish. So we know they're horrible stuff. But we just assume they're normal. So our techniques in psychology don't ever go towards actually eradicating them from the mind. This seems completely too cosmic for words. But that is what Buddha is saying. So simple. The word Buddha implies the both. There's this nice analogy that a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. So broadly speaking, and I'll be quoting this a lot, and it's the name of our teachings too. It's the entire Buddhist path is contained in this. You know, the work, the initial work we have to do on our own mind. That's the basis that is for our own benefit. Initially, is the wisdom wing, lessening the neuroses and growing therefore naturally more contentment, more courage, more clarity in our own self. And on the basis of this, we can then cultivate the compassion wing, which is our ability to be of benefit to this planet, you know, or whoever. So even just the word nirvana, that refers to the wisdom wing. The word nirvana is not some alternative to heaven. It's a word, it actually just means cessation of suffering and its causes. That's what you accomplish on the wisdom wing. So these are psychological states. You know, I say it, it's true, it's a joke, but it's true. Buddha didn't say the word psychology. I don't think he'd been to Greece. It's only since all our psychologists and philosophers, you know, we really do appreciate the Greeks, so half our fancy words are in Greek. But Buddha didn't say psychology. He said mind, you know, whatever the word is in Hindi, I have no idea. But it's not wrong to say Buddha's a psychologist. That's not even a cliche, it's an utter simple truth. But that's not evident to us because we think it's spiritual and we don't use the word mind when we think spiritual. So you really got to redefine your terms if you want to hear me properly, okay? Don't use our definition of psychology. Don't use your definition of mind. To hear these words, you're going to have to. I'm not asking you to believe what I'm saying. Because that's one of the points about the Buddha. If what he's saying is not from revelation, he's not speculating, he hasn't made it up, let's hope, then he's not, and equally he's not asking us to believe him. Can you imagine if I were Einstein here telling you about relativity? You know perfectly well it's come from my experience. I've observed it. You know that. We understand that concept. Therefore you know it's not revelation. You'd be very surprised if I told you I had a vision about relativity last night. You'd chuck me out of the door immediately as a maniac. I didn't have a dream about it. You're hoping I'm not stealing it. The worst sin in science is to steal someone else's ideas. Look at the rigour. But look what we do in spiritual. Everybody grabs everybody's ideas and says they're their own, and no one cares anyway. I mean, it's so shocking, actually. And I'm for sure, you know, if I asked you to believe that relativity is true, you'd better believe it. You'd again be shocked. And this is the point. This is so surprising to us, because we think about morality and spirituality like that. This is not the Buddha's view. He's like Einstein, insofar as what he's presenting has come from his own experience. Therefore, he's not asking you to believe him. So what is he doing? Well, like Einstein, I'm telling you what I found to be so from my own observation, and then I will present you my findings. I will present you my methodology, and I'll say, over to you, baby. I'm happy, I found it. It's up to you now. That's the approach here. That's the approach. So, but the idea in spiritual is so deeply ingrained because we have creator models. I'm not criticizing. Please, if you have faith in a creator, I'm not trying to dissuade you. Buddha would just say, you know, it's appropriate to talk about these things, but he doesn't have that view. He, in fact, would, you know, argue with it. He says we don't need creating. We're going to go into this. So there's different ways of talking about Buddhism, you know. Some people, the entire 3 days will be just sitting here learning to do some kind of meditation. I won't be doing that. For me, I always, since a kid, I always wanted the big picture, somehow the big view. Always, you know, I'm not trying to sound noble or anything, but wanted to know what and why and how. Sort of, you know, when I was a kid, I was a Catholic, very devoted to God. But then kind of gave that up when I was 19. I preferred boys, so you can't have both, can you, when you're a good Catholic? So it was goodbye God, hello boys. Then I came to London in the 60s. I was kind of ripe and ready for revolution, and then quickly I became kind of a radical lefty communist, and then kind of black politics, then feminist politics, and then I bumped into these Tibetans, and so far so good. Well, it was interesting because anyway, that, you know, this is, for whatever reason, the Buddhist view and the way it's taught in Tibet, because there are many different ways of presenting Buddhism, like I'm saying. Very much an emphasis on the big picture, because Buddhism, in fact, which might be surprising to us, is in fact a worldview. A worldview. The thing that's obvious to the world is this thing called meditation, with your eyes closed, something mysterious happening. And this is one element, a crucial element of Buddhist teachings. But the bigger picture is what is the universe, who are we, where we come from. It's an entire worldview coming from the minds of these great thinkers, philosophers, meditators, and coming out of the Buddhist tradition, the group before the Buddha. So basically these Hindus, these Indians, they created this technique, like I said, which is one of the central techniques in Buddhism. When Buddha diverged in his own direction, specifically in relation to his own findings about the self and the way the universe exists, then of course this central technique was one of the key ones still of the Buddhists, and people today still utilizing this technique. So the Buddha then diverged into his own direction, in particular in relation to his own findings about the self. So that's the essence of really what you're trying to do as a Buddhist, to unpack and unravel using this technique. In the long term, we need to cultivate this particular technique. It's known as single-pointed concentration. And that's this single-pointed concentration is referring to a subtler, like I said before, a subtler level of mind. And in the long term, to accomplish what the Buddha says we can, in the long term, we need to actually cultivate this subtle state of consciousness. Most of us in this life won't accomplish that level of it. We can certainly practice it. I will talk about it. Technically, it's not complicated. But it's one of the central techniques that's used. In itself, it's got benefits, but it's just a technique that's used to get the mind to be more honed and more sharp and more clear so that we can do the real job of unpacking and unraveling the contents of our mind. Because another way of putting the whole Buddhist path is in terms of getting rid of suffering and developing happiness. Speaking really simply. Another way of presenting it, it's a system of ethics and morality. They all come to the same thing. They all come to the same thing. It mightn't be evident hearing it, but eventually, as if one is practicing and studying it, all these things lead to this cultivation of this potential of this human mind of ours, you know. The Buddha would say everybody possesses. We all possess the potential to be Buddha. That's how he says it. So what happened in this when these amazing Indians created this technique in their pursuit of what is the self? Then they went internally. So we in our world we think about the self. We think of psychology. We think of Jung. We think of Freud. We think of the brain. Listen, I'm not criticizing, but they did not look at the brain. You ask them where their brain was, they'd probably never heard the word. But they know their mind. Because for them, the Buddha, and this is a fundamental point, we'll go through this, for the Buddha, the mind is not your brain. It doesn't mean it doesn't play a role. He's not being fundamentalist, you know. It's quite nuanced, but to hear it, we really get the point, and to really hear what Buddha's saying, the stuff we're going to talk about, we need to take this as our hypothesis, that your mind is not your brain, first point. So for them, the mind's internal. So what they did is, in this